welcome to my knitting podcast. My name is Irma and you can find me on YouTube, Ravelry and Instagram as Wolwerkjes. Welcome to this place on the internet where I talk about all the things I make, mostly knitting. I have a few other things to show you this week, and I do want to explain a little bit more about knitting with double pointed needles, for example for socks, so when you're knitting around, and I have some tips for you there, but I will start with the things I have worked on and I have been making, and I always start with what I'm wearing, and I'm wearing a new finished object, which is this blouse. I had it fabric laying around for quite some time now, and I was procrastinating it. I don't know why, maybe because it's really quite an old pattern, not really old, but I think more than a decade old, and the language in the pattern is really specific, and I've never had any lessons in sewing, and there were some parts of the pattern I was not really sure how to do it, and I will show the inside so you can, with a close-up, so you can see a few of those things. But I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I'm wearing it inside this skirt right now. It's like open on the bottom, and it's moving out a bit, and it's quite short. So I can't see myself wearing this over a low jeans or anything like that, but for this kind of outfit it's perfect, and it's really thin and light, and I love wearing it. So this is the piece I made the past few weeks. It's out of a very thin cotton fabric. It's printed, you can see that on the inside. It's not a woven in pattern or anything, it's a printed pattern. I'm very happy with the button bands and the loops that go around the buttons to make it close. So there are no buttonholes, but these are loops that go around the buttons so it stays closed. And there is an extra piece of fabric next to the buttons, so you cannot see through the openings that you create when you button a shirt like this. So that was really nice. The top edge, there went something wrong with the neckline. I misread the pattern. This should have been, I think, twice as wide. I don't mind. It sits nice around the neck, so it's not turning around or anything, but that could have been better. And there was something with top stitching the facing over here, and there was something with top stitching the facing, and I think next time maybe I will stitch it in a different way. So what I did now is I did a very thin border of top stitching. You can't even see it because I did it with black. You can see it a bit over here, and it makes this corner is fine. It makes this corner a little bit wonky, which is not visible for someone who doesn't know, but I would have done it a little bit differently. And I stitched it over the already made seams because it was flapping back on itself. So that's something that I have to think a little bit more about if I make this one another time. You can see there is a stitch line over here, so the front is composed out of two parts, and the front and the back both have a bottom part. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see it when I show you the inside. So there is also a seam line over here, and you make gathers to fit the main part to the bottom piece. So you have gathers in the back, and you have gathers on both fronts. You see I have my thread that I used as the markings for where to sew, and the gathering are still in there. I took most of it out, but I see I forgot it over here. That means they're not showing on the outside, because I made really good care of taking all those threads out on the places where you see them on the outside. No one will see this. This is just for your own, if you want to remove it or not. So yeah, also the hemming, I should have made a bigger seam allowance over here, because it should have been a double folded hem, and I made a single folded hem just because I didn't have enough fabric to make it double folded. I did try to do it, but it was a mess, so that's why I did a single folded hem. And again, it's the inside, so no one will see, but yeah, that's something I have to take care of next time. The sleeves also have gathers on the top, and also here I did something wrong with the edge of the sleeves, but again, no one has the picture next to it when I'm wearing it, so it's all fine. And I have to be careful to when I put it on, that the edge is not flipping around, and the edge of the fabric is not visible. I have to take care of that, but that's a simple thing to do when putting it on. And because it's not tight but quite close fitting, once it's on in the right way, you don't have to think about it again. So that's my blouse. So I'm very happy that I made it. And the other thing I finished, I can't show you. I can show you a little bit of the progress over here. And I just forgot to take a picture before I gifted it, because it was my mom's birthday past Friday, and it was a gift for her. You may recognize the yarn. It was the yarn I had left over from my pie shawl, and when I started it, she was already telling me that she really loved those colors. So I just thought I will make something with leftovers for her, and I have woven a scarf for her. And it's really fun to do weaving for someone else. I think knitting can be fun, but really takes a lot of time, and I'm quite specific about my knitting. It's also a really easy motion to get into and to be doing while watching a movie or something. So yeah, that was really fun to do. And I think the only other thing I have been knitting on are socks. And you can say, well, if you have knit just on one pair of these socks, you may have finished a pair. And I think I would have finished a pair, but I chose to knit on 3 different socks instead of just one. And I don't know why, but I just really wanted the different textures and the different colors and the different styles of socks I'm doing. So don't judge me, I'm knitting 3 pairs of socks at a time. The first one I have shown you last time. I think I had just cast on, so I knit like not yet half the foot, I think. It's hard to see how far along you are because of the diagonal line in there, but yeah, it's fun to do. And I finished the shaping of the front, and now I have to knit in this diagonal line until I am at the place where I should start the heel. So that's one of the socks I've been working on. I found another sock I have been working on a long time ago, and I almost forgot about it. And it's This one I already have a finished one, I can show you. It's, oh, there's a needle in there. So, I did a garter heel flap and a heel turn with a gusset, and I'm on the second sock and I'm working the heel flap right now. This is my own hand-dyed yarn and I really love working with this wool silk rami blends. I dropped stitches, let me pick them up before they slip away. Just like that. Yeah, so that's also a sock I've been working on, and it's really fun to see. I think I'm working on 3 pairs of socks and I'm using 3 different techniques for them. So this one I'm doing magic loop, this one I'm doing on Haya flyers, I think they call them. You have the 3 needles with the flexible bit in the middle, and the last pair I have been working on, which is a new cast on, I'm knitting on DPNs. So I'm using 3 different techniques for 3 different pairs of socks. As you can see, DPNs. I'm knitting this out of the cotton sock yarn I bought recently, and I'm knitting a pattern out of the 52 Weeks of Socks by Lane magazine, and I will put the name of the designer and the name of the pattern on the screen. It is a pattern knit top down, and you have a lace piece in this sock, but it's going to turn from the back of the foot to the back of the leg of the sock to the foot, so the front of the sock. So you're turning the lace around while you're knitting, so it needs a little bit of attention. And I don't know the heel construction yet. I haven't read through the complete pattern. I don't know why. I sometimes just go with the flow. Yeah, and I do like knitting with this yarn. I was afraid it would be a little bit splitty when I was casting on, but I don't have any problem with the yarn splitting at all, so that's really nice. It does fluff up a bit when you work it, but not in a way that it's bothering me. And I really do like the color progression, and I think it's not disturbing the lace at all. It's still visible. It's a little bit thicker sock yarn than the wool sock yarns are, maybe. It can also feel like that because cotton is heavier than wool is, so you have quite a substantial piece of sock when you're knitting this. I do have a marker over here. I did not mark the beginning of the round like you would sometimes do. I don't really do that often, but you can always mark the beginning of the round, and they specifically tell you which 2 needles are the front of the socks and which are the back of the socks. So what I did, I put a marker over here on the first needle, and I don't change the first stitch on that needle is my first stitch, so I will always know that is my first stitch, so that's working quite fine. When you're moving the lace, it started in the middle over here on those 2 needles, and when you're knitting this it will turn away, so you have to move around some stitches to make your yarn overs and knit 2 togethers and stuff like that be in the right spot, but it's completely fine. So it's really fun to do, and I will show you a little bit of my knitting on DPNs, and it's mostly about creating leathers, and you see I don't have a leather over here in the stockinette. It's working really nice, and I will have some tips for you to avoid leathering. So for the purpose of showing you, I've casted on a little swatch on DPNs with thicker yarn and bigger needles, so it's a little bit more easy to show. I've not done anything at my corners, so where I changed the needle, and I will show you that it is quite neat and there is nothing happening with leathering or anything. And the first thing I want to show you is that the fear of the leather is sometimes a bigger issue than the leathering itself, and I will show you that by knitting halfway through a needle and show you something. So I'm halfway through a needle here, and at the point where the needles meet, it's the same as where my other needles meet. You have a little bit more tension because the needles are falling apart, and you can see that you see the legs of the yarn in between the stitches, which can cause leathering if your tension is not right. Because that's what it is. When you have a leather in your socks, it's because the tension is different there than it is in the rest of the sock. So it looks like this can become a leather, but you always have that where your needles meet. So now it's one stitch away, and now it's another stitch away, and you can see that there's no issue here. When you're knitting, you're not thinking about your stitches will give a leathering effect because it's just the way you knit. But because you switch needle at a corner when you're knitting with double pointed needles, it looks like a really big deal that your yarn is, your fabric is a little bit more tensioned there, but that's just really normal. You always have that where needles meet, and the only thing is that you're switching to knit your stitches from one needle to the other, but that's the only thing that's changing. And as long as you keep your tension neat and even, there's nothing going to happen. So that's my biggest tip there. Don't think too much about it. It can take practice because it's like a mental thing that you're afraid of it making a leather, and most of the times that's a bigger deal than knitting different, because the way I avoid it is by trying not to knit different in the first or last stitches, and I will show you why. And I will do a few I will show one on camera, then I will do it a few rounds that way, and then you will see what is going to happen. The first thing, not really a tip because most people know this is not a good idea, but the first thing you want to do is knit that first stitch of your new needle. So this is the stitch I'm going to knit, and I'm going to do that on my new needle. And the thing most people want to make this really tight, so they give a little bit more tension on that first stitch before they continue knitting. So I will do this on this spot for a few rounds, and we will come back and see what has happened. So I did like 5 rounds. I put a pin in so I would remember where to pull tight. I will take this out. I did like 4 or 5 rounds, and you can see if I tension this fabric a bit that you will get a leathering effect over here, whereas you won't have that in the rest of the fabric. So there's definitely something happening over here. But what is very interesting, and I will explain in a bit why this happens. First thing is you see that it will continue to move down. So that's also something, if you change your method of tensioning throughout a pattern on these corners, it will expand downwards. You can see it's quite tight and neat over here, but because there is something happening over here when you pull the fabric out, you can see that it creates like a line throughout the whole fabric. What is happening over here, let me see, what is happening over here is, this is the corner, so this is my first stitch of my new needle, this is the last stitch of my previous needle, and you see that the lettering is not in between those stitches, but the lettering is in between the legs of the last stitch. And that happens because I make this stitch tighter than the rest of my stitches. So what is happening is I make this very tight, so, and this stitch was normal tension and all the other stitches were normal tension. That creates that this will get closed in between the stitches, but it has to it's still going around the same needle, so it has to, the thread has to come to close this, has to come from somewhere else, and then it's creating more tension in this last stitch. So by making this one more tight, you get a gap in the last stitch of your previous needle. And there are people that are telling you, instead of making this stitch tighter, make this one tighter, because this is where the lettering happens. But the only thing that will do is change the place of this letter to the left or to the right, because you create a different tension, so your fabric is going to behave differently. And instead of moving that around, the better solution is try to get even tension. And one of the things that made me feel more comfortable and create a more even tension is by knitting a lot on DPNs. It's not like the first time is going to be perfect, but it wasn't when you started knitting, your tension wasn't perfect either. You had to learn things. But what is most important with double pointed needles is having trust that your needles don't fall out. So when I knit with double pointed needles, I try to put my stitches always in the middle. I don't like really slick needles. I don't think they're on the market either, because when you have really slick needles and really slick yarn, your needles can fall out, and that's something you don't want. So you want needles with a little bit of texture. These are metal, so they are slicker than like wooden needles. That's just because I am so comfortable using these now. I'm not afraid of them falling out, and it's a little bit textured. It's like aluminum. And I have never had problems with needles falling out. I only hold the needles I am knitting with. So instead of trying to hold all my needles and oh my god, they're going to fall out, and having a lot of stress about it, I learned, and it took me some time and doing it a lot, but I learned myself to only hold the needles I am using, and this one is just dangling in between, and this one is just hanging loose as well, and I knit like that. And what I really like about double pointed needles is that once you get used to all the needles hanging around your hands without trying to hold them, is that your knitting experience is quite the same as with normal length needles. So I use the 20 centimeter, but you also have 15, or you have even longer DPNs, but I can rest the needle very light and loosely in my hand, and I have no I don't need a lot of force to make my hands hold the needles. And by making it a normal knitting motion, you are less likely to change your tension while knitting. And it's the same when you're doing magic loop. You do have a place where you go from the front to the back, or from the back to the front, and you have to start your new needle. And it's the same as you do when you're knitting flat on the edge. You have to get that first stitch on your needle, and the more comfortable you get with the needles you use and with how to hold them, it makes the chance on having a visible leather there a lot smaller. So my tip is, do not try to tension your yarn different, because if you're going to do that, and it's very easy to find, it's over here, you will get, when you tension one stitch different than the rest, your knitting is going to gap. And if you do it on this stitch, it's going to gap here, and if you do it on that stitch, it's going to gap there. There will be a leather appearing, so don't do it. Even some people say tension the second stitch more, because then you don't have the gapping over here, but then it will create different tension just next to the corner, and it will also interrupt your tension in your stitch pattern. So just don't do it. Just try to make your tension even, and the way to get there is by being comfortable with the needles you're using. The thing that a lot of people don't have the issue with magic loop, but do have it with double pointed needles, although you still have, like when you are knitting magic loop, you still have over here and over here the chance to get leathering. But the reason people are having don't have that problem with magic loop is because they're not afraid of their needles falling out. The cable is in there, it cannot fall out, it's all attached, and that's why they're more comfortable with holding their needles, and that first stitch won't get a different tension than the rest of the stitches. And I think that's the biggest problem. And you can see I can really, this is not going to fall out. Even in my bag, it happens with magic loop the same amount of time as with double pointed needles, and I almost never have my needles falling out. So that's not something to be afraid of, and that is something you have to teach yourself. It's not something that's going to come by itself. You just have to relax in it and do it a lot, and the more you do it, the less issues you have. So those were the 3 projects I've been working on, and those were my tips on the double pointed needle knitting. And I do have something else to talk about. I am thinking about joining the slipstravaganza mystery knit along by Stephen West. He does a shawl knit along every year for the past 5 or 6 years, I think. Don't quote me on that. And I've never joined. I watched people joining and I'm thinking about joining myself this year. So I did want to use some of my own yarn for this shawl, just because it has been a while since I made a bigger project than a pair of socks out of my own yarn, and it's always really fun to use it, I think. So that's the way I wanted to go, and I took out these colors. Let me see if I can hold them up for you. I went with these colors. I'm not sure yet if this will be my palette, but it's one of the options I have. This would be the main color, and this would be the 3 contrast colors, because you need 2 skeins of the main color and 3 different contrast colors for this pattern. I watched a video on Instagram Live where he is telling a little bit more about choosing the contrast colors, and he was telling your second contrast color will be like the star of the contrast colors. However, you may translate that to your own liking, but that's what he was saying. And he was also telling like the first and the third will have a moment together, so it would be nice if the first and the third interact with each other in a nice way and put the color you want to be the star of the shawl in the middle. So I don't know how the shape of the shawl will be, but I think that was really nice to hear. So I'm thinking about going this way. I should put it like this for you. So you have like 1, 2, 3. And I think this would be really nice with, like I said, the main color being the gold. But I do have another option as well. And it is based around 3, for the moment, 3 skeins of handspun I made. There is a fourth on the way, which would be nice because I have like a little bit less than a normal fingering weight skein on these because it's a little bit thicker. So I think that would also be gorgeous as the contrast colors, and also because he said it would be fun to add a little bit of texture in your contrast color. So add a pop of mohair, add a little bit of sari silk, you can go crazy. And I was already thinking about making a westknit design with these skeins, whether it would be another Vertices Unite because I really love that pattern, or one of his other designs. I don't know why, but once I have these of the bobbins in a skein, I was like, I need to do a westknit design with this, and it would be really fun to do the mystery knit along with the skeins. And as I said, there is a little bit darker one still on my bobbin, so I would have 4 contrast colors, which is not a problem. I can play around with that. The only thing is I need to go for a main color with it, and I'm not sure yet. I have a few options which I will show you, and you can comment what you like the best, but I'm not 100% sure yet. And because I'm a dyer, I can always make new colors, so that's sometimes this is a problem because it makes the possibilities endless. But we will see what I have for now. I could go with just a plain skein of undyed yarn, which would be nice, but I'm not sure if it will do the best for the greens. So it is an option, but I can also dye it like is also light blue in here, so I can dye it like a light blue, or yeah, or maybe grayish tones. So those are options. I can also, I went also to my leftover pile, and I have a few skeins of this merino silk single yarn left over, and I think it makes the greens pop more. So this would also be really, really nice as a main color, but I'm not sure if I have enough. So I would have to go and look at the exact yarn that you need for the main color. And I've seen someone's leftovers, and it's not like you have half a skein left over. So I think I don't have enough of the dark color, but I can dye like, it won't be the silky. I have a silk blend. I have like this silk blend I can dye in a dark navy. We will see. That's also a possibility. And I have this, which is also gorgeous. The only thing is this is worsted, and it's way thicker than what he calls for. It is a single, and it's really bouncy, so I think I can knit it on a tighter gauge, but you don't want to make a scarf too stiff, I think. So I think this is a no-go because of the weight of the yarn, but for color I also really like the heather of the main color that way. So I'm not sure yet, but I am thinking that this will win it over this. And I don't know why, because I really like that color palette. And maybe I can just knit 2. Why not? But yeah, I'm not sure. I think I just really want to use this handspun. This is also an option, which I'm not going to do, I think. Maybe I will. What do you think? This is also quite nice. I'm just not sure, but I think those need to be in this shawl. So yeah, that are some of my thoughts about the new mystery knit along, and I just can't wait until it starts. I still have to buy the pattern on Ravelry, but I'm already like looking at videos, and it's really how fun it is to watch people joining. I think it will be way much more fun to actually join myself. And I'm not a really huge participant in like the chats and stuff. I do like to share things here, but I also really like just looking around and see what other people do, and that's always fun. But I think it's even more fun if you're joining yourself. So that's the thing that's going to happen, and I just can't wait. So that's it for today, I think. I will see you in 2 weeks with another episode, and hope to see you then. Bye!